Welcome to another episode of G.E.N Talks, hosted by me, Melissa,
and me, Desiree.
Where the goal is to empower the youth of Glendale and connect youth to community resources, individuals, and organizations through interviews and discussions.
And today we are joined by a special guest, Adrianna Cuevas. Adrianna is the author of the Pura Pelpre honor book, The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez, Cuba in My Pocket, and The Ghosts of Rancho Espanto. She is a first-generation Cuban American, originally from Miami, Florida, a former Spanish and ESOL teacher, and Adrianna currently resides in Austin, Texas with her husband and son, where she is currently writing her next middle school grade novel.
Don't forget to follow us on our socials and Instagram and Facebook at MyGlendaleLAC. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, make sure to give us a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Glendale Library Arts and Culture, where we post full episodes every Friday at 4:30 p.m. So thank you, Adrianna, for taking the time every day to talk with us. We have a lot to discuss.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So to start off the interview, what has your relationship with storytelling and writing been like? And have books always been something you were drawn to?
Yes, in short. For me, I've known that I wanted to be an author actually since I was in fourth grade. And it's because the teacher that I had, she did this special activity with us that really showed me how to channel all the stories I was always telling myself in my head, because I have ADHD and I have an overactive imagination. So I'm always daydreaming, but she showed me how to channel that and write my stories down. And so ever since then, yeah, I've always loved storytelling. And I think I've always been a reader because for me, like I said, as somebody with ADHD, reading was an escape. It was a way to help me tune out all that sensory information that was just too much for me, and just focus on a story and the images that it created for me in my head. So yes, I have always been a massive reader.
So you are also a former Spanish and ESL teacher. What is teaching drew you into it?
I got into teaching because I had grown up in Miami, Florida, around a ton of people who spoke Spanish, but I went to college in Missouri where there's not that many people who speak Spanish. And it had never been important to me to share my culture before, because like I said, in Miami, my culture was all around me. And it wasn't until I moved to the Midwest that I felt that lack, and kind of felt like what it was like to be other. And I wanted to help students understand my culture and other Latinx people. And so that's really what drew me into teaching. It was also a comfortable choice, I will admit, because both my parents were teachers. My dad was a college math professor. My mom was a middle school science teacher. So it was a familiar profession to me as well.
And what is something your students have taught you that you still carry on with you?
So when I taught, particularly when I taught ESL, I taught anywhere from kindergarten up to 12th grade, but that like middle school, like probably 4th, 5th grade through 7th, 8th grade was my absolute favorite age to teach. And I loved that because kids that age are still silly and still childish, like they should be, but they also have this growing sense of justice and fairness and wanting to have an effect on the world. And I just absolutely loved those two things at play in like the same person. And so that's what I always try to show in my characters, because my students inspired me to do that, rather than just creating these kind of one-dimensional silly kids or one-dimensional, super serious burden of the world kids. That age of student is just so complex and interesting. And I think my students that I had really inspired me to write for that age group.
Do you remember like specifically when you wanted to become an author?
Oh yeah, I was in 4th grade. Yeah. I knew it right then. It obviously took me a while to get here. No, I knew right away in 4th grade, because like I said, that was the age I was when my teacher, showed me what she did. She had played some music and she told us to draw whatever images popped into our head while the music was playing. And I was like, this is going to be the easiest thing ever. I'm doing this all the time anyways. So she did, and I drew away. And when the music stopped, I looked at my paper and I got super mad. And it's because what I had managed to draw on my paper looked nothing like what I had pictured in my head. And it really frustrated me that I couldn't put that story I had told myself in my head out on paper in pictures. And that's when she said, no, write out your story, tell it that way. And so for me, that's when I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I've always been a storyteller. Like I said, I'm always telling stories in my head. I come from a family of storytellers, really. Even though my parents, like I said, were teachers, I have an older sister who's a nurse, but growing up, we would sit around the table and just tell stories. That was something that was ingrained in our family. And so, yeah, I want to say, so pretty much always wanted to be an author. But the reason it took me so long is I wasn't brave enough to share my work with other people. That's really an act of bravery, to take something that you've created and share it with the world and risk them liking it, not liking it. And so it took me a while to get to that point where I was comfortable doing that.
What gave you that courage to share it to the world?
I think I finally got to the point where I wanted to prove to myself if I could do it or not. I started writing my debut, The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez, in 2016. It was my last year of teaching. I was teaching 11th grade English. And I thought, you have a choice. You can either keep doing this, you can keep teaching, which I didn't mind. I loved teaching. Or you can do this thing that you've always had in the back of your mind that you aren't sure whether you can accomplish or not. Do you want to risk it? Do you want to try it? And so I thought, well, why not? Here we go. And I think a lot of that was because my son was in 3rd grade at the time. And he had books that he enjoyed reading, but he was having trouble finding books that he wanted to read. And so my initial thought was, that's why I wrote Nestor Lopez. I thought, I'll just write a book for him that he wants to read. And then I just went from there.
Is the process for writing a book different for you each time, or is it mostly the same?
It's mostly the same for me, because I found what works for my brain. I do have to have a specific way that I accomplish my writing each day, because like I said, I have ADHD. And so I'm very aware of how my brain functions and works best. But overall, yes, I feel like it's the same. Do some books get produced faster than others? Yes. Like normally it takes me a year to go from like when I first get that idea and I'm brainstorming, doing all that research, first draft, all the massive amount of revision you have to do until like I have made it the best I can possibly make it. It's usually about a year. But like my latest book that I actually just got to reveal the cover for, The Ghost of Rancho Espanto, that took me 5 months. And it just, I don't know what it was about that book, but it just came out a lot faster than usual.
And in your journey of becoming an author, how have you seen yourself grow?
I have found that I'm a lot braver. Like I was saying, I'm not as afraid anymore to put my work out there. I will admit, I don't read reviews. I don't read reviews of my book. Those are for readers to decide whether or not they want to read my stories. My job's already been done. I've written the book. I can't do anything if you don't like it. So in that sense, I do protect myself that way, because honestly, a positive review would actually affect me just as much as a negative review when I sit down to write. So I just don't read reviews, but I feel like I've gotten braver with sharing my work. I feel like also I've found that I really, really love boosting other authors in their books, because I've been a reader all my life. And now, like, not only do I get to fangirl over authors, but a lot of these authors I personally know now. And so it's really fun. So I found that joy. And I think I've really found how to like target and channel my creativity. I used to, when I would get an idea, I would always have this voice in my head that would immediately edit the idea. Oh no, are you sure anybody wants to read that? Is that a good enough idea? Something like that. Now I find I'm really able just to let myself go with an idea and brainstorm, no matter how ludicrous it might possibly be.
I actually what are some of your favorite authors?
Oh gosh, that's a horrible question. No, only because I'm terrible at narrowing it down. Because as you can see, like I read a ton. I'm a super huge fan of horror. And so whenever I do school visits, the one book that I always recommend to kids is this book, Hide and Seeker by Daka Herman. I am obsessed with this book because for a middle grade novel, I can't actually believe that her editor let her get as creepy as she was allowed to be in this book, because it's really creepy. Because I'll admit, because I'm a horror fan, most middle grade books I don't think are scary, because scarier things. That one's scary. Yeah, and so I think that's probably the one I'll recommend, because you'll have me for an hour here pulling books off the shelf.
Can I also say, sorry, just look at your background. I see like BT 21.
Oh yeah, I have my BTS albums are actually my books right
sorry,
there.
I had it.
Yeah. Those are all my albums.
Yeah, I kept on looking at them. I was like, I want to say something, but we'll
I was like,
whenever I do school visits, that's how, like, every so often, like in the chat, a student will be like, excuse me, I think I see.
Yeah, sorry,
that's my author fun fact.
Love that.
So the Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez was your debut novel. What was your influence behind the novel?
So I wrote that book. Like I said, I originally wrote it for my son. If you ask my son, who is in 8th grade now, who the main character of that book is, he will swear on his life that it's him. And while that's true, he is a huge influence for Nestor Lopez. I feel like, and I think a lot of debut authors do this, like, this is our one shot. Sometimes we feel like, so we're going to put whatever we can into this book. So I did. The reason that Nestor's dad is in the military is because my husband was in the military. He was a military policeman in the Army. And so the first several years that we were married, we didn't see each other at all because he was overseas. So that's why Nestor's dad is gone in the book, and they can only talk through emails and letters. Because I basically put all those feelings that I had while my husband was gone. That's how Nestor feels. And then my son, when I started to write the book, when he was in 3rd grade, he was absolutely obsessed with animal trivia. He would sit on my bed with this massive animal encyclopedia and flip through it and read a description of an animal. And I would have to guess what animal he was talking about. And I never got it right. But I knew that if I wrote a main character that had a special ability where you could talk to animals, he would just think that that was the greatest thing ever. So I knew that was how I had to create my main character. And then last thing, I think, the reason that Nestor's Cuban American is because I also knew when my son was looking for books, there weren't a lot of books out there that had Cuban American boys as the main character. And I wanted him to have that. And I wanted other Cuban American kids to have that. And not just that, I wanted all kids to be able to see a Cuban American boy getting to be the hero of the story and getting to save the day, because I think that's equally important. And so that's why, honestly, all my books, they'll always have Cuban American main characters, just because that's who I am. So that's what I'm going to write. But I just also feel like it's really important that we have that kind of representation. So yeah, that was my shove everything I possibly can of my own personal experiences in my one book, in case they don't let me write anymore. Thankfully, they have.
And I also want to talk about Cuba in My Pocket. Your father's life inspired the story. What was the process like in creating this book? And did you learn anything new during the process about yourself or even your family?
Oh, I learned a ton about my family. Oh my goodness. Because honestly, so much of what's in the book, it wasn't like that was dinner table conversation growing up. Like I said, my family, yes, we did tell stories growing up, but not like that. There were so many things that I learned about my dad and his journey and what it was like for him to come to the United States. And so that was really valuable. I will treasure that experience forever, because my dad actually passed away just a few months before the book published. And he got to read the whole thing. He was my fact checker for the book. I would write a chapter, I would send it to him, because what happened was I would interview him and ask him all these questions like, Dad, you had to flee your country. You came all by yourself. You didn't know anyone. You didn't know if you were going to see your family again. How did you feel? And he would look at me and go, well, it was fine. I'm like, no. I'm trying to write a novel that has like drama and tension. Like, I need something more than just, it was fine. So I obviously had to change some things with his story to fit, our story arc that we authors have and all that. But I did send it to him to make sure I was still staying true to the spirit of what happened to him. So he read the whole book. He even got to see the cover before he passed away. But having that experience where you are documenting somebody's life and preserving their history. And when it's your own family too, to me now, I feel like that guides so much of my storytelling, because that's it. My dad's not here anymore. I can't get any more of those stories from him, but I have this book, you know, my son has all of this history of his grandfather. And so for me now, I think preserving our family history and traditions and culture, I think a lot of that is really what guides how I tell stories now.
So like, I think you touch a little bit upon this, but do you ever feel like the pressure to represent your community through your stories?
Oh gosh, yeah. Especially I think with Cuba in my pocket, because I was telling my dad's specific experience. This is what happened just to him. And so I started to tell that, and I realized that I really had to make sure that I was still also honoring the experiences of all those other kids that came at the same time as him. So there's that balance of telling, really in all my stories, what is specific to you and what's true to you, but what still is like honoring your culture as a whole. And there's a fine balance with that, because I mean, we're all not the same, even though we identify as the same culture. Cubans, in the book, I talk about picadillo, which is a ground beef dish. Well, I add raisins and green olives to it. One of my other friends, Chantel Acevedo, who wrote Muse Squad, is like, if you put raisins in picadillo, I will never speak to you. Like, we all still have our opinions and differences within our culture. And so as you're representing your culture to maybe those that don't know about it, you have to make sure that you're not presenting it as this is how every single person that identifies this way is. You know, we still have diversity and variety within ourselves. So it's a fine line, honestly.
And even touching upon that, that's what I love about like the books that you have written, because yes, you know, your characters are Cuban American, but you make sure to show them as like humans, you know, with all the qualities and that they have to offer, and then also show like that difference that you said, that like, yes, you know, yes, they're Cuban American, but everyone is different, and every family is different, even if they're part of like this whole community. So, you know, jumping off of that, like, what do you hope people feel when they read your words and read the stories you have created?
I would love to say that I have some lofty goal, some huge meaningful thing, but I will be completely honest with you. And it's only because, like I've said, this is the type of reader that I am. I hope that my books are an escape. I hope that I have told my story so well that you get lost when you're reading it. You lose track of time. Maybe you forget where you are, because I feel like then I have really engaged you. Maybe I've helped you feel some things that are new to you. Maybe you've learned some new things. Maybe you crave Cuban food now. That would be awesome. But I am perfectly fine with my books always being an escape, where somebody knows, hey, if I want to get lost in a story, I know I can read Adrianna Cuevas's books. That would be a goal as an author.
So for any teen wanting to be an author, what is a piece of advice that you would give them?
Oh, my biggest piece of advice, and I want to say it's the easiest, but they might not think it's the easiest. If you want to improve your writing, you have to read as much as you possibly can. I read a ton. But you can't just read. As you're reading, you need to pay attention to what you're reading. Pay attention in the story to the things that you like about how it's being told, and the things equally important that you don't like about how it's being told. Do you like it when an author spends a ton of time describing the setting? Do you like it when there's a ton of dialogue, or do you wish they would just do something? Because then you want to take that. And really, you should be writing the same kinds of stories that you like to read. That's what I do. I like fast-paced stories with a bit of humor, but a little bit of undercurrent of emotion, things like that. And so that's what I write. So as you read, pay attention to what you're drawn to. And there's really something to be said about being exposed to so many stories. It's like learning a language. We always talk about you develop an ear for a language, like things just sound right. That happens in writing. When you read enough, you develop an ear for good writing, so that as you are crafting your own story, you know what sounds good, you know what flows well. And so, yes, I would say read as much as you possibly can.
Awesome. And before we end, we have some rapid fire questions to ask you. The first question is, what is your favorite color?
My favorite color is black.
When are you the happiest?
As I am drinking my coffee in the morning, not after, because then I have to get to work, but that like while I'm drinking, it is pretty euphoric.
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Oh, wow. Oh gosh, my poor 18-year-old self, who was a disaster because she felt like she had to do everything, and she felt like she had to get it right the first time. I'm a lot more gentle with myself in terms of learning new things and making mistakes and realizing that it's not the end of the world to make a mistake and to fail at something. So I think, yeah, I would encourage myself to try new things, but to also be okay when they were a complete disaster.
If you could have 3 people dead or alive for dinner, who would it be?
Oh, wow. That's tough because I'm more likely going to fixate on what we're eating rather than who's there. Okay, so as we discussed, I'm going to lump this one group, even though I'm cheating by doing this because there's 7 people. So you know who I'm going to pick.
Yes.
So BTS would be one of mine just because I think a dinner with them would be so chaotic and fun that it would really make me laugh a lot. I would have my dad because I think it would be, he didn't get to see all of the achievements that Nestor Lopez, like he passed away before I won the Pura Belpré honor for that. And so it'd be really cool to brag to my dad in front of BTS nonetheless.
Right.
That would be awesome. And then my third, gosh, I don't know. Because I'm not a history buff, so like I'd love to pull out some like fascinating random historical figure to impress you with that I would want to have dinner with this person. Honestly, I don't know, my family, like I love spending time with my family and hanging out, so they would have to be there too.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh wow, gosh, man, the deep question. My legacy. Honestly, yes, I want to be known for my stories and that people have enjoyed them and gotten something from them. But for me as an author, I would prefer that my legacy was just as equally how much I boosted minority and queer authors and their voices as well. Because I'm not a massive author, but I have achieved a bit, and I really feel like it's important to help other people. And to invite them into this space. And so that's really what I would hope my legacy as an author is how much I opened up the doors for other minority and queer authors to do the same.
What is a song that you have on repeat right now?
Okay. I'll pull up my Spotify and you're gonna make me tell on myself. I actually, and it's only because, and I'm gonna blame my ADHD for this, but the rhythm of this song helps me focus like none other. But Psy and Yoongi's new song, that really helps me, like the rhythm of that song. I super love it. And the video's hilarious. So yeah, I've listened to that way too much. Spotify's like, really again? Okay.
I love that. What is your favorite movie?
My favorite movie, oh gosh, it's a toss-up. There's 2, and they're vastly different. Because I actually really like the movie Motorcycle Diaries. It's a really, I was about to say really old movie, but it's not that old. It is the story of Che Guevara, who was a horrible person, but it was when he was growing up in Argentina before he had become Fidel Castro's right-hand man and a murderer, honestly. And I love the movie because it shows how human he was, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, how did he get to the point that he did? But it is a beautiful story. And then because I'm a horror fan, my other favorite movie is Train to Busan, because it's my favorite horror movie ever.
So what is a book that you have recently read or currently reading that you would recommend?
Let's see. I just read, where's it at? This book, Freddie versus the Family Curse, is by Tracy Badua. Tracy is of Filipino descent. And this book is amazing because it's a middle grade and it's super fun because the main character, Freddie, does end up getting, like, just sucked in by this family curse. But Tracy actually manages to incorporate a lot of really fascinating Filipino mythology and history that I had no idea about. But I think it just came out like 2 weeks ago, but I highly recommend this one. It's really good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adrianna. We learned a lot about you. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to sit with us and talk. Can you let everyone at home know about any upcoming projects and where they could connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So my next book, The Ghost of Rancho Espanto, comes out April 4th. And I got to reveal the cover today, actually. And yeah, so I'm really excited about that one. It's a very fun story. It's actually the fastest book I ever wrote. I hope to do that again. But yeah, so that's what I have coming up.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. We really enjoyed talking to you, and we love like how you're creating these amazing books. So continue creating amazing books.
Thank you so much. This is
Thank you.
wonderful. Thanks for having me.